Scorsese spent 3 hours in Casino showing you exactly how the mob ran Las Vegas. The skimming, the violence, the slow collapse of an empire built on stolen money and borrowed time. He got almost everything right. Almost, because the one man who actually made all of it possible, the man without whom there is no Stardust, no Skim, no movie, gets 5 minutes of screen time and a fake name. And that is one of the greatest omissions in the history of crime cinema. His name was Allen Dorfman. He authorized $160 million in Teamsters pension fund loans to the casinos. He was a decorated combat Marine who earned a Silver Star at Iwo Jima. He ended up as the Chicago outfit's financial kingpin, and Casino reduced him to a supporting character. In reality, the FBI built the most elaborate wiretap operation in their entire history just to take him down. Dozens of agents, 21 phone lines, 2,000 reels of tape. And when they finally got him, when the conviction finally came down and the walls finally closed and the Chicago outfit did something they almost never did, to understand what that was and why it shook the entire underworld, we need to go back to where Allen Dorfman started, because his beginning looks nothing like the ending. Allen Dorfman was born in Detroit in 1923 to a working-class Jewish family. He grew up on the west side of Chicago, attended Marshall High School, and when World War II broke out, he did not wait to be drafted. He enlisted in the United States Marines, not as a clerk, not as a supply officer, as a combat Marine. Dorfman saw action at one of the bloodiest, most brutal battles in the entire Pacific Theater, the Battle of Iwo Jima, a volcanic island fortress. Over 20,000 Japanese soldiers buried inside tunnels and reinforced concrete bunkers that artillery could barely scratch. Nearly 7,000 Marines were killed storming that island. Thousands more were wounded in some of the most savage close-quarters fighting of the entire war. Dorfman didn't just survive Iwo Jima. He distinguished himself there. He earned a Silver Star for gallantry in action, the third highest combat decoration in the United States military awards, given only for conspicuous acts of valor against an armed enemy. This was a legitimate American war hero. In Casino, Andy Stone is a smooth-talking backroom dealmaker who looks like he's never been uncomfortable a day in his life. The real man behind that character had already earned one of the highest military honors his country could bestow before he ever set foot in a boardroom, before he ever sat across a table from a union official or a mob boss or a Las Vegas casino developer, before any of it. After the war, Dorfman came home to Chicago and enrolled at the University of Illinois. He became a physical education teacher. He made about $4,000 a year, a decorated combat veteran teaching gym class for modest, unremarkable pay. That should have been the entire story. A hero comes home, lives a quiet life, fades into the background of history, but Allen Dorfman had a stepfather, and his stepfather changed everything. Paul Red Dorfman ran the Chicago Waste Handlers Union. He was not a peripheral figure. Congressional investigators in Washington later described Red as the direct link between the Teamsters Union and the Chicago underworld, a man who existed at the exact intersection of organized labor and organized crime. In 1949, Red struck a deal with a rising Teamsters official named Jimmy Hoffa, operating out of Detroit. Red would introduce Hoffa to the key organized crime figures in Chicago who could make his rise unstoppable. In exchange, Hoffa would steer the Teamsters insurance business to a new agency one run by Red's wife Rose and his stepson Alan. Just like that, the gym teacher had a new career. Allen Dorfman went from teaching physical education at the University of Illinois to running the Union Insurance Agency, processing claims for Teamsters members across the country. Within 5 years of that deal being struck, he was a millionaire. But the insurance business was just the entry point, the door into a much larger room, because what Red and Hoffa had really handed Allen Dorfman access to was something that would reshape American organized crime for the next 30 years. The Teamsters Central States Pension Fund. This was not some minor investment account. The Central States Fund was a massive financial war chest, the pooled retirement savings of hundreds of thousands of American truck drivers, warehouse workers, and union laborers spread across the entire Midwest. It was one of the largest pools of investment capital in the country, and for years, it operated with almost no meaningful outside oversight. Through his family's connections and his deepening personal relationship with Jimmy Hoffa, Allen Dorfman gradually took control of how that money got invested. By the late 1950s, he was sitting in his offices on the northwest side of Chicago, approving pension fund loans that would determine the shape of the American underworld for a generation. The people lining up outside his door were not building hospitals or community centers or affordable housing. They were organized crime figures real estate developers with deep mob ties, and casino operators in Las Vegas who needed enormous amounts of capital to expand along the Strip at a moment when no legitimate bank in America would touch them. Among the loans Dorfman authorized was a $160 million package to the Argent Corporation. Argent owned a collection of casinos in Las Vegas, including the Stardust Resort and Casino. The Stardust was the beating heart of the skimming operation that Martin Scorsese built his entire film around. In Casino, the Stardust becomes the Tangiers. And we watch Robert De Niro's character run the floor while Joe Pesci tears Las Vegas apart at the seams. But the movie never properly answers the most fundamental question underneath all of it. Who bankrolled this? Where did the money actually come from? The answer was Allen Dorfman. Frank Lefty Rosenthal ran the Stardust floor. Tony the Ant Spilotro enforced the Chicago outfit's interests on the ground with violence and fear. But the hundreds of millions of dollars in union pension money that made the entire operation possible, that built the casinos, funded the skim, kept the whole machine running, flowed through Dorfman's hands before it ever reached Las Vegas. He did not play a role in the operation. He financed it from the beginning. He was the reason it existed at all. And for years, it worked beautifully. Dorfman lived the life that the money could buy, always impeccably dressed, perpetually tanned, jet-setting between Chicago, Las Vegas, and Washington on a first-name basis with politicians, Hollywood figures, and the most powerful union officials in the country. He moved between the world of organized crime and the world of legitimate business with a particular kind of confidence, the confidence of a man who knows that both worlds need him and neither world can afford to lose him. In Casino, Andy Stone reads as a competent middle manager, a useful functionary, someone who keeps the gears turning. The real Allen Dorfman was the central nervous system of the entire operation. Without him, there was no pipeline from the pension fund to the casinos. Without him, there was no Stardust. Without him, there was no skim. Without him, none of the rest of it exists. But being indispensable to the mob only protects you for as long as you remain useful. And what happened to the people around Dorfman when they became inconvenient should have been a warning he took more seriously. In February of 1974, Dorfman was indicted for fraud. $1.4 million in pension fund loans funneled to a plastics manufacturing company in Deming, New Mexico. Indicted alongside him were some of the most recognizable names in the Chicago underworld. Joey Lombardo, known as the Clown, Anthony Spilotro, known as the Ant, and Dorfman's longtime friend Irwin Weiner, a bail bondsman with connections to organized crime throughout the city. Federal prosecutors had built a strong case. The foundation of it was a Chicago businessman named Daniel Seifert, who had been a partner in the scheme and had agreed to tell the government everything he knew. Then on September 27th, 1,974 masked gunmen burst into Seifert's plastics factory in Bensonville, Illinois. They shoved his wife Emma and their 4-year-old son into a bathroom. Then they chased Daniel Seifert out of the building and shot him to death with a shotgun at point-blank range. With Seifert gone, the government's case collapsed. Lombardo's charges evaporated. The other defendants were acquitted or saw their indictments dropped entirely. It would take over 30 years and the Operation Family Secrets investigation before Lombardo was finally convicted of ordering that murder. But in 1974, the message to every federal prosecutor in the Northern District of Illinois was unmistakable. Witnesses against Allen Dorfman's circle do not make it to the stand. The feds didn't back down. They came back 5 years later with something the outfit could not intimidate and could not kill: microphones. In 1979, the FBI launched Operation Pendorf, an acronym that stood for Penetration of Allen Dorfman, and the scale of what they built was unlike anything the Bureau had attempted before. Dozens of federal agents worked the case full-time. FBI agent Pete Wax personally broke into Dorfman's offices at the Amalgamated Insurance Agency on the northwest side of Chicago multiple times, in the middle of the night, to conceal and activate bugging equipment without leaving a trace. When the operation was fully in place, federal agents were monitoring voice-activated transmitters and wiretaps on 21 separate phone lines at Dorfman's offices and at his home. The surveillance ran for 14 months and produced over 2,000 reels of recorded conversation. Federal investigators would later describe it as the most elaborate electronic surveillance operation in FBI history at that time. And what those microphones captured was devastating. The wiretaps recorded Dorfman conspiring with Teamsters President Roy Lee Williams and Chicago outfit enforcer Joey Lombardo to bribe a sitting United States Senator Howard Cannon, a Democrat from Nevada. They offered Cannon a sweetheart real estate deal on a piece of union-owned Las Vegas property called Wonderworld in exchange for his help blocking a trucking deregulation bill that threatened the Teamsters' grip on the freight industry. But the bribery plot was not even the most striking thing on the tapes. FBI agents were stunned to hear Lombardo, a man who publicly performed the role of a neighborhood buffoon, a clown who couldn't possibly be taken seriously, sitting in Dorfman's office, reading the Wall Street Journal and discussing complex financial transactions with genuine sophistication. The tapes caught them threatening the life of a Las Vegas casino owner over an unpaid debt, recorded conversations about underworld interests in gambling and pornography across the country, and captured them openly discussing who should become the next president of the Teamsters Union as casually as two businessmen picking a vendor. The FBI now had enough evidence on tape to dismantle the Chicago outfit from the top down. The only question was whether Allen Dorfman would live long enough for any of it to matter. 51 of those recorded conversations were played for the jury in a federal courtroom in Chicago. On December 15th, 1982, the verdict came back guilty. Allen Dorfman, Roy Williams, and Joey Lombardo were all convicted of conspiring to bribe a sitting United States senator. Dorfman was 60 years old. He was released on $5 million bail pending sentencing. The charges carried a potential sentence of up to 55 years in federal prison. For a man his age, that was not a prison sentence. That was a guarantee he would die behind bars. And that is precisely what the Chicago outfit understood, because Dorfman facing 55 years was not just a man facing prison. It was a man with every reason in the world to cooperate. A man who held more secrets about more people than almost anyone alive. He knew where the money went. He knew who got paid. He knew which politicians had been bought, which union officials were compromised, and exactly how the casino skim operated from the first dollar lifted off the counting room floor at the Stardust to the last suitcase of cash that arrived in Chicago. On top of the bribery conviction, he was already scheduled for another trial in Chicago. He had been indicted in San Francisco just 1 week before his death for attempting to loot the funds of a labor union there. The Department of Labor was moving to freeze his company's assets. Every direction he turned, there was another case, another charge, another wall closing in. A veteran Chicago crime reporter named John Drummond later explained how the outfit read the situation. Allen, at 60 years of age, can't take hard time anymore. He's not going to be locked up for 20 years. He's going to talk. So they had to do something about it. And now you're about to hear what the Chicago outfit did, the thing they almost never did. On the morning of January 20th, 1983, 3 days before his scheduled sentencing hearing at the Dirksen Federal Courthouse in downtown Chicago, Allen Dorfman drove to the First National Bank of Lincolnwood on the northwest side of the city to handle a financial transaction. With him was Erwin Weiner, his longtime friend, the same bail bondsman who had been indicted alongside him in that 1974 fraud case, the same man with deep, long-standing connections to organized crime figures throughout Chicago. After the bank, Dorfman and Weiner drove to the Hyatt House Hotel at the corner of Toohey Avenue and Lincoln Avenue. The building was locally famous for its distinctive purple brick exterior, which is why everyone in Chicago simply called it the Purple Hotel. Opened in 1960 as one of the first Hyatt properties in the Midwest, it had 2 upscale restaurants, a popular outdoor pool, and a guest list over the years that included celebrities like Barry Manilow and Roberta Flack. Dorfman and Weiner were heading inside to have lunch at Tessie's, the hotel restaurant. They never made it through the front door. As they walked between parked cars in the lot, 2 men in ski masks rushed them from behind. One of the gunmen shouted that this was a robbery, staging the opening seconds to look like something it wasn't. It wasn't a robbery. The gunman immediately opened fire with a .22 caliber handgun. He shot Allen Dorfman 7 times in the back of the head at close range. Dorfman collapsed face down between the parked cars. 8 shell casings scattered across the asphalt around him. On that bitter January afternoon in Lincolnwood, his blood spread across the frozen pavement and turned to red ice before paramedics arrived. He showed no signs of life. Erwin Weiner, standing directly beside Dorfman when the shooting started, was not touched. Not a scratch. The gunman never pointed the weapon in his direction. Not once. Weiner was questioned by investigators for several hours. Many in law enforcement believed he had set Dorfman up, luring him to that parking lot at that specific time, at that specific location, where the hitmen were already in position and waiting. Allen Dorfman died in broad daylight in a busy suburban parking lot surrounded by witnesses. Drummond explained the outfit's calculus afterward. They couldn't wait. They couldn't use patience or pressure or a quiet back-channel threat. The bosses had to take the risk of a public hit, the kind of hit they normally never would have sanctioned, because Dorfman was days away from boarding a flight to California and sitting down with federal prosecutors. They killed him in public because they had no other choice left. The murder of Allen Dorfman remains officially unsolved. No one has ever been charged. But retired FBI agent Pete Wax, the same man who had personally planted the bugs in Dorfman's office during Operation Pendorf, later identified two prime suspects. Reputed Chicago outfit members Ray Spencer and Leonard Orris. Both men were dead within 2 years. Spencer was found under mysterious circumstances in a Florida motel room in 1984. Orris was shot to death gangland style outside his laundry business on the west side of Chicago the following year. The men who likely pulled the trigger on Allen Dorfman were silenced before they could ever tell anyone what they knew. The outfit cleaned up after itself, the way it always did. Except this time, it didn't work. Here is the final irony that Casino never shows you. Killing Allen Dorfman did not protect anyone. Those 2,000 reels of tape from Operation Pendorf, the ones recorded inside Dorfman's own office at the Amalgamated Insurance Agency, the room where he sat across from these men and helped them plan their crimes and count their money, became the evidentiary foundation for one of the largest organized crime prosecutions in the history of the United States. 3 years after they murdered him to protect themselves, those recordings helped convict the top boss of the Chicago outfit, Joey Doves Ayupa, along with his underboss, Jackie Cerrone, Angelo the Hook LaPietra, and Joey Lombardo himself, the very men who almost certainly ordered the hit, buried by the evidence gathered from the office of the man they had killed to silence. The Chicago outfit was gutted. The old Las Vegas was finished. Corporate ownership replaced the mob-controlled casinos up and down the Strip. The era that Allen Dorfman had financed from the very beginning, built loan by loan, deal by deal from that Northwest Side office, was over. Scorsese got the big picture right in Casino. The skimming, the greed, the violence that inevitably turns inward, the collapse of something that was rotten from its foundation.